Welcome back to the channel and thanks for being here. I hope you've had a blessed week and that your weekend was equally the same. First things first, I'd love it very much if you take a second to listen to a short, important word from our sponsor.
Please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell for future uploads. Mama will be dropping a new one every week and you don't want to miss it. Thank you in advance.
All right, let's jump in. So today we're taking a little look at depression and anxiety because both in our society today are super prevalent and rife. I'll use this opportunity to stress again that I'm no mental health expert or professional or a counselor or a therapist, but I am someone who's been through some stuff, and I'm hoping and believing that by sharing some of my personal experiences and perspectives in the context of my faith journey, that it may be of help to someone. I'm definitely an advocate for seeking help from appropriate and available sources, be it self-help, professional help, and spiritual help. We only need to look for it and trust that all help that is true will come to us, and it will come to us from the Lord. So whether or not you've experienced depression or anxiety or both, it's highly likely that you know someone who has, or at some point, or is dealing with either one of those or with both in some form. And what's really fascinating is that it's probably the person that you least expect it to be that is suffering from it in the most chronic way. Everyday discussions around mental health topics are definitely better than they were in previous years and even decades. You know, there's so much more info, guidance, advice, etc., that's more widely available and accessible. But I do think that there's still much more to be done on how these matters are integrated into natural conversations of everyday language, everyday settings and everyday cultures, you know, in the home, in the workplace, but especially, in my opinion, in the Christian community. I've suffered from clinical depression on and off since 2010. And for me, I would say it was definitely a single significant traumatic event that, you know, burst wide open a bag of many unresolved stories that then threw my entire sense of self into a series of questions. You know, for me that felt like trying to wade through treacle. In my experience, I feel that depression and anxiety are still treated as taboo topics in general everyday settings. It's sometimes assumed that it's not that serious, or it's avoided altogether, like a big fat contagious elephant sat in the middle of the room that poses a risk to anyone who ventures too close. You know, if we think of a broken leg, a pulled ligament, even a tooth infection, you'll find that these types of physical ailments or conditions are typically treated with the appropriate levels of concern, empathy, you know, sympathy that we've come to expect and appreciate when we get it. But I've learned, and I'm still learning, that in most cases some of these reactions in relation to depression and anxiety and how they're received, whether or not they're received, are not personal to you, but rather it's sometimes a person's self-protective mechanism that kicks in on auto whenever they're presented with something strange or unfamiliar that can't be discerned or understood. I think it's a natural human response that is designed to steer us clear from something that we perceive as uncomfortable, awkward, or anything that's not deemed, positive or doesn't make us feel positive. Again, because I think that we're shaped to view such things as a threat. But it's when we find the courage to push beyond this natural reaction that we then discover deeper understanding that's waiting for us beyond the constraints of fear that our mind will have constructed. So, let's take a look at 3 common myths about depression and anxiety.
Myth number 1. But you don't look depressed.
Surely we must know by now that with each person comes a unique character, and with each character a unique set of characteristics. Well, the same applies with how depression or anxiety can present or manifest on a person. It can vary wildly from one person to the next because of our various characteristics, especially the unique ones, which will undoubtedly impact our forms of expression. The symptoms of anxiety or depression in a person, generally speaking, will likely look like a significant or undesirable change, but how they present is not always uniform. So for some, the symptoms are outward and visible, whereas for others, theirs may be happening inwardly. Sometimes it can flip between both, and I suppose that's the point. There is no look to depression or anxiety. Both anxiety and depression can also sometimes trigger certain physical reactions, responses and behaviors. But again, the specifics of these are likely to vary from person to person. So for me, I tend to internalize a lot. But I realize as the internal pressure starts to mount, it generally leads to some sort of combustion. So sometimes it can present as an implosion, so I came more into myself, into my head, or an explosion where cracks in my, physical demeanor or behavior may start to shift. Depending on how well a person is able to maintain their composure through pain or stress or what have you, all may seem fine and dandy on the surface. Coping mechanisms are a real thing. But it's in holding space, listening, really listening, checking in, and most importantly, not ignoring the matter at hand, are all things that can help, even if you don't understand the problem or even what solution to offer, and these things are not always easy, but the best things aren't.
Myth number 2. If you're a true Christian, you wouldn't be dealing with depression or anxiety.
Are we still really saying this? I mean, we can start with Elijah, one of the most well-known prophets of the Old Testament, who was so pleasing and faithful to God that he never even saw death. But running in fear of his life from Jezebel, in utter despair, he prayed to God, asking him to take his life. Why? You know, because my guy was overwhelmed. He was exhausted. He probably hadn't even slept in days. To me, that sounds a lot like burnout, which resulted in depression and then suicidal thoughts. And that's Elijah, you know. And what was the Lord's response? Not to rebuke him, not to chastise him for failing in his faith, but rather it was to sustain him with food and with rest. There's also Jonah. His reaction, running from the presence of the Lord and the assignment that he was given, was one of pure anxiety. You know, even after his repentance and then deliverance from the belly of the great fish, even after eventually fulfilling the assignment, you know, imagine he, you know, later on still found himself dealing with, you know, bitter resentment, which led him to even lashing out at God and praying to die. You know, once again, asking God to, you know, just finish things for him. Yet God still covered him. Literally, if you know the story, he literally covered him. Then there's King David. The Psalms, the book of Psalms, consists of many songs where he praises and worships the Lord, but there are many in which he laments at his, you know, various misfortunes or worries. In Psalm 143, specifically, there's a verse that he talks about feeling weak and overwhelmed, his heart feeling numb, and the weight of it sounds really, really heavy and desperate. The point is, it doesn't make us unchristian to feel these things. You know, the impact of our flesh and our sufferings. It makes us human. And the best part of it is God is compassionate and loving and faithful to our needs. And as hard as it sometimes is, we're reminded that we are able to take the matters that are causing us, you know, depression or anxiety, and we can give them to him. Why? Because he cares for us. He even sent his spirit to dwell, you know, to live, to remain, to stay within us and help us in our weaknesses. So much so, he even intercedes and prays on our behalf when we can't. That tells me that God sees our humanity and he doesn't punish us for it, as long as we bring it to him.
Myth number 3. You need more of a positive mental attitude.
PMA. I think this phrase has been abused and misused to the point where it no longer carries the weight of its original intention. I have a whole separate video planned just on toxic positivity. So I'll do my best to keep this one brief. Depression is not just sadness, and anxiety is not something over nothing. So it's not always possible to positively think your way out of everything. Such afflictions are usually signaling our attention to an issue that is rooted deeply within. Sometimes we may just need a break, and all the positive mental attitude in the world will end up falling flat until we allow ourselves the pause that we need. Whereas other times we may glitch and need help and support in getting unstuck and moving forward. But with all the conditioning we're thrown into from the day we're born, needing a break or even asking for support or help, is sometimes viewed, both, with other people as well as ourselves. Asking for help or support can be viewed as a weakness, laziness, or sometimes even failure. It's so very easy to punish ourselves for pausing temporarily, because we're living in times that are so unnaturally busy and incoming, that there's always something that we could or should or would be doing or reading or making or striving for. You get the drift. And the enemy makes light work of helping us to condemn ourselves to the extent that we end up feeling as though we don't deserve any help or any relief. But if even God rested on the seventh day after creation, who are we to say that we don't need respite? Then there are the times when the break that we need is a permanent one. We need to stop. We need to quit. But just the connotation of those words can send one into overdrive. But context, as always, is important. I believe that a healthy, positive mental attitude is quite simply the ability to recognize when it's time for a change. And the optimism of positive mental attitude comes in when we know and we believe that that change will lead to better. Sometimes that change is staying the course with new vigor, but sometimes it requires a complete change of course. Either way, we need God's grace and covering always and in everything that we do, because without it, our positive mental attitude on a course that's expired inevitably reaps nothing but blind faith, disillusion, and frustration. So it's key that we continually seek to discern His will for us through prayer. Otherwise, our positive mental attitudes will have us striving in our own power in vain, and this will always lead us astray. So, while the likes of depression and anxiety in these times are rife and complex and heavy laden, my question to you, to me, is, is there anything too hard for God? Do you realize how dark it has to be in the valley of the shadow of death? That's dark. That's a dark place to be. Yet, in the Bible, it says that we're to fear no evil. Why? Because He's with us, protecting us and comforting us. And we know that wherever He is, there is light, there is ease, and there is grace. Nothing happens that he hasn't factored into his master plan. The deep and secret things belong to him. So he's not calling us to understand. We don't have to understand. All he's asking of us is to trust, obey, and depend on him in all things. And it's then, only then, that we start to experience liberty. I hope that this has been a blessing to you. If so, please share with one and bless another. Let's build a community that's rooted in resilience, in hope, and unwavering belief in the power of God, especially in these challenging times. It's time that we discover the power of steadfast faith as we break through and overcome. I pray that the Lord blesses you and keeps you and makes his face to shine upon you. I pray he's gracious to you. I pray he turns his face towards you and gives you peace. Amen. Thanks for watching. Be blessed and go good. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe.